We're on day 8 of the Tom Girardi trial, and it appears as though the end is near for the prosecutor's case. It looks like we have the last prosecutor's witness, but in the meantime, the defense has brought up a number of witnesses to testify as to Tom Girardi's capacity, and these witnesses are starting to get pretty interesting on the issue of capacity. And the first one up was a longtime secretary for Tom Girardi, Shirlene Fujimoto, secretary for over 27 years for Tom Girardi. Stewart, what were your thoughts in terms of what her testimony was, and what does she bring to this party?
So there's two things that the defense is doing here. The first is they're talking about a timing argument. And the timing argument is they need to get as far back as possible to 2010, showing that Tom Girardi had a mental decline. That's the first argument they're making. The second argument they're making is if that doesn't work, then there's this evil mastermind, Christopher Kamen, which we're going to learn more about, some interesting issues about this guy in this that came out in the trial, that he was the mastermind that took all of this money. And poor Tom Girardi, who was lacking capacity, didn't have the ability to even understand what was happening. And of course, this is a very complex firm. We've already learned there was 135 bank accounts. Asking anybody with the best mental acuity to understand the accounting here, no, you're going to have to hire somebody like Arthur Anderson to go through. Arthur Anderson, are they even around? You're going to have to hire one of the big 4 accounting firms to go and review this stuff. So here comes Shirlene Fujimoto, who was the secretary for 27 years. The thing that I find interesting is these big-time trial lawyers, these big-time plaintiffs' lawyers, many of them don't draft any of their pleadings. Many of them don't do written discovery. They don't even do depositions. Some of them do, obviously. But we're starting to see how the sausage was made at Girardi and Keese, at least as far as Tom Girardi went.
Yeah.
He would get how many phone calls a day and how many emails would they print out?
According to Fujimoto, he would get about 20 phone calls a day, 200 to 300 emails. Okay, well, that's not unusual.
Well, no. What's unusual is she would print them out.
That's the unusual part, yes.
And read them to him.
Yes.
And then he would dictate back what he wants. I mean, think of the full-time, 20 phone calls a day, 300 emails with your secretary. What else did this guy have time to do?
Yeah, I can't imagine even the time it took to print out 300 emails, much less dictate your response back to them. Obviously not an efficient system, and somebody who maybe doesn't quite understand how emails work. But be that as it may, Fujimoto comes in and says, as of 2019 to 2020, he was getting pretty forgetful. And so she's saying that she was so worried about him. He seemed very sad, a very sad man. She said, I've never seen him file briefs. But again, this goes back to your timing issue. She's saying that as of 2019 to 2020, she seems very forgetful. Okay, that's not going to be back in time far enough for the defense, is it?
It's not, and at least in my opinion, it's not. And the other thing about the timing issue, look, it's a little bit of a red herring. Okay, so what?
Right.
So what? What the defense wants to say is, if we prove to you that this guy had a mental decline, therefore we win. No, look, if he had been giving more money to clients than he was supposed to, okay, well, let's talk about that. I mean, maybe there's a mental decline because he's giving more money to clients. But from what we've seen from the evidence, every single decision that was made at Girardi and Keese was to benefit Tom Girardi. So all of these things that he's accused of, they always went one way, and it benefited him. But if he's forgetful, if he has mental decline, and he starts giving his money away to his clients more than he's supposed to, well, now that argument, I'd look at it and go, okay, the guy's confused because he's giving more money away. But he's not confused when it comes to money because it's always a one-way street.
As to him,
yes.
So you're not convinced that he did all these terrible things for 10 years, but as of 2020, he's now a sad, broken, forgetful old man, and therefore he should be let off the hook.
I think he is a sad and forgetful old man, and I think that everyone saw this, and it is kind of sad to think about when you get to your 80s. People tend to not look at you the same way they did. That's just a fact of life, and I think that was happening with Tom Girardi, but I think Tom Girardi had done some things that were inappropriate. From 2010, he probably did things that were inappropriate before that, but from 2010 forward, and it always benefited himself. And so you've got this timing argument, and again, I say, so what? Even if I can prove, if the defense can prove that he had some mental decline somewhere in this time period. Does that absolve him from the things that he did, the things he said to his clients, the things he said to his vendors, the things that he said to his referring attorneys? He always had a story for them as to why they weren't going to get paid. If he was giving them all the money he had in his firm, okay, there is something wrong with Tom Girardi.
Right.
And the fact that he didn't change, and we're going to get into some of the witnesses, that he didn't change his clothes as much as he used to, and he wore sweatshirts with stains on them, and they even got to the point where there's hemorrhoid stains on his pants. This is obviously the testimony was quite colorful yesterday. But what are your thoughts so far on all of this?
Yeah, I think the timing issue is exactly correct. I mean, the fact that he was forgetful and suffering decline in 2019 and 2020, in my mind, does not absolve him of everything that he did from 2010 to 2020. He knew what he was doing throughout all these years based on the testimony that we've been hearing. And for them, yeah, I think you're right about the red herring, for them to now portray him as a sad, broken old man, well, he kind of put himself in that position, didn't he? And so what do you say to the victims who lost millions upon millions of dollars that they should have received? Well, sorry, this guy, I know this guy took millions of dollars from you, but he's a sad, broken old man now. So you should just get over it. I mean, there has to be some consequence for these actions, I think.
Well, and the reporters have done a good job on this case. Obviously, yesterday, the victims were not talked about like they had been. But I think you've hit on something, and that is, what about these people that were harmed? Some of them injured gravely. They're not going to be ever the same again. Their families are never going to view them the same again, and these people got screwed out of their money. And then you could get also to vendors, legal vendors. They provide resources to Tom Girardi's firm. They're not getting paid. You've got these referring attorneys. There's many personal injury attorneys that are, for whatever reason, afraid to try cases, or it's just not part of their business model. So they find people like Tom Girardi. And there's other great personal injury attorneys. I don't want to mention their name because I don't want them connected to Tom Girardi's behavior, because I believe these are good, decent lawyers out there. But these referring attorneys are trusting the name and the brand Tom Girardi, and so they're calling once their case settles, and they're being told they're getting anything. There's a runaround. And again, that sounds like a plan to me. That sounds like somebody that knows what they're doing from a Tom Girardi standpoint. He doesn't want to pay these people for the services that or for the money that he owes them.
Yeah. So I want to get to the travel agent because that's going to be pertinent to our timing issue. Let's just quickly talk about two other witnesses, though. Richard Marmoreau, former partner at Skadden Arps, was Girardi's golfing buddy. Saw signs in Girardi in 2019 and 2020 that he was getting confused and forgetful. Also, Isabella Mansilla, she was Girardi's housekeeper, also testifies that in 2020 he's starting to get forgetful. It's kind of sad. He can't take care of himself. He can't drive. She's taking his keys away. So there's two more witnesses, but again, their testimony seems to be limited to 2019-2020 timeframe. Now we get to Amber Ringler, who is the first witness I can think of, who now is saying, well, as early as 2015 or 2016, she felt like Tom Girardi was having some forgetfulness, and he would refer to people as, hey, buddy, hey, pal, and he would ask her, well, who is that? Who is this other person? And so this is the first witness that takes us back to 2015, 2016. Is that enough? What does that do for our capacity argument?
Again, it's kind of, to me, a so what. Mental decline is an interesting thing to view. It's progressive, and it usually starts out fairly slowly. And at the end, 5-10 years in many cases, you'll see a dramatic decline at that point. So, maybe he is getting a little forgetful. The problem with Amber Ringler is she's the first witness to say 2015 or 2016. So you see the defense is slowly but surely bringing that timing argument down as far as they can. We're still not to 2010. Right. So we want to see who testifies about that. But the problem we have here is she's saying, oh yeah, I noticed there were real problems in 2015 or 2016, but yet in 2019, she refers one of her friends to Tom Girardi.
For a case.
And so why would you refer a friend to Tom Girardi if you have questions about his ability as a lawyer to actually even handle the case? And so I'm not sure that was as good and hopeful as the defense thought that argument would be.
And you figure in 2015, 2016, Tom Girardi would be around 75, 76. It wouldn't be uncommon for him to have some forgetfulness, forget a few names. I mean, that's not unusual for somebody. That's not unusual for me at 53. It certainly wouldn't be unusual for somebody in their 70s. And I don't think it supports out-and-out incapacity. And then we get to Michael Severo. He's an attorney in Pasadena who actually represents Christopher Kamen, but previously he represented a vendor who had sued Girardi and Keese, GS1 Group. And after sending Girardi after Girardi sent them a partial payment of $15,000, Girardi wrote Severo an offer letter, what appears to be an offer letter, in an attempt to renegotiate the deal. And so there again, you're thinking, well, that doesn't sound like somebody who's incapacitated. Somebody who's trying to renegotiate a deal seems to indicate some capacity there.
It seems that, if he did have a lack of capacity of some kind, some type of mental decline, it never turned into the type of mental decline where he didn't care about himself. He was always able to care for himself and think about himself, at least from an economic standpoint, it looks like. And again, if the errors were to everybody, including himself, well, maybe that's something worth looking into. But he's making decisions that a despicable person would make, and that is, I'm going to take money and keep it for myself, money that should go to my clients. And he's making that decision every single time. And that tells me somebody knows what they're doing when they're making those decisions.
So yeah, the MO is consistent.
Yes.
So now we go back to Mr. Robertson. He's the IRS agent. He had been testifying previously. He's back on cross-examination. And one of the things that the defense attorney points out with Robertson is, Kamen, he fled to the Bahamas after everything went south, and he was arrested in 2022 when he was returning to Baltimore. But Girardi never fled the country. That was the big, aha moment, I guess, for the defense. I don't see that means much.
Well, again, a red herring. I'm going to prove to you that Girardi didn't flee the country, therefore he's innocent. Ted Bundy didn't flee the country. Charles Manson didn't flee the country. People can do bad things and not flee the country.
Yes.
So the idea, again, the red herring is to focus on something that's not relevant in the case, and that is, who cares if he didn't flee the country? Did he do these things? Did he keep money from people that were entitled to money, people that were grievously injured, people that deserved the money? Did he keep it from them? And did he do it on a consistent basis? And that appears to be the case. So again, the timing argument, the Christopher Kamen argument, he didn't flee the country. I'm going to prove all these things to you, Mr. and Mrs. Juror. At the end of the day, so what? Even if you can prove to me he didn't flee the country, that means nothing at the end of the day.
Okay, and then Mr. Schneider goes on, the defense attorney, and he references another partner at Girardi Keese, Christopher, I don't really know how to pronounce his name.
Amay?
Amay. So Christopher Amay, who had his own company, and he had a separate account where referral fees from other law firms would be paid so that it wouldn't go through Girardi and Keese. And so I think the defense attorney is trying to point out, look how all these people are doing all these things around Tom Girardi, and so Tom's not in control of all this. Although when I read that, I thought, well, Christopher probably just knew that Tom Girardi was trouble, and so he set up a different system so at least he could get the referral fees he was due, and he wouldn't have to put it through Tom Girardi's machine.
That's exactly how I read it. This was a smart lawyer, and again, I don't know the details here, that goes, you know what? I want to make sure I'm in control of this, and so I'm going to have my own account to do that. I didn't see that as a big issue either way.
Yeah, and then Snyder points out that Robertson, who's the IRS agent who's testifying, had to hire an outside company to help him compile hundreds of thousands of checks, and Tom Girardi didn't have that. Tom Girardi was doing it all on his own. But I think, my thought there is, yeah, but why? Why was Tom Girardi doing it all on his own? Why, if you had a firm where $1 billion was moving through it over 10 years, would you do it on your own?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, and why not?
Yeah, it's too complex. It's interesting. A couple weeks ago, when we first saw that there was 135 bank accounts, it reminded me of Enron. And
Right.
If you remember Enron, they were so complex and they had so many levels of entities. They had, LLCs and partnerships and corporations and consolidated returns that were just too overwhelming and confusing for even the final four accounting firms to figure out what's going on. And so I'm thinking, why does this guy have such a complex accounting system? And they point out in this article that there's some testimony that, look, this was a very complex accounting system they had. It wasn't a very good accounting system they had. And so where does that lead us? I don't know. I just know that people were entitled to money, and Tom Girardi would spin a tale to them and not give them the money they were entitled to.
Yeah, and so I think this whole idea that, this was very complex and Tom was doing it all by himself and you had to hire people. Well, yeah, he probably shouldn't have been doing it all by himself. And he certainly didn't have a problem with paying tens of millions of dollars for airplanes, country clubs, luxury vacations, all that stuff.
Right.
And at some point, Snyder even says, we can all agree that Girardi and Keese had bad accounting practices. And I just kind of had to chuckle at that because it's like, well, that's an understatement.
Right.
That might be the understatement of the entire trial.
Right. And again, let's assume they did have bad accounting practices. Does that absolve Tom Girardi of his behavior that testified to so far? And I would say it does not. And then the thing that hit me here is that at the end there's a email that's read from 2019, and it's an individual named Finnerty, and he's emailing Tom Girardi, and he says, "Look, you've created an intolerable working situation where we are confronted each day with requests of payments from our clients, from our referring attorneys, and our vendors." And so you can just imagine how hard it was to go to work every day working at Girardi and Keese, because you're being asked, think about that, you're the middle person and your client is telling you, where's my money? And you can't get it because Tom Girardi's not releasing it. He's the guy that had the keys, apparently. That's what the testimony is thus far, that everything ran through Tom. And so what are you left to do? Do you lie to your clients? Do you quit? I know there were some lawyers that did quit Girardi and Keese. It would have been it's an impossible situation to be in, because you cannot let your clients know, oh yeah, the money's coming, because you know it's not.
Right.
But you can't tell them that Tom Girardi is keeping it. So what do you do?
Yeah, I know it'd be very stressful and impossible. And it kind of leads, there was mention where Robertson also said that the government has what they call target letters. And so they sent out letters to 4 different partners from Girardi and Keese, former partners, saying that they are also the target of investigations, which is, horrible for those people. But I guess the question becomes, what did they know? And what participation did they have, if any? And so the government's obviously investigating that to see if there's any culpability. But yeah, as of 2019, that Girardi and Keese would be an absolutely miserable place to work because of all those demands that you can do nothing about.
Yep. So we've got the timing issue, we've got the Christopher Kamen issue, we've got the bizarre behavior of Tom Girardi, according to some witnesses. Is that going to be enough to lead this jury to say, no, we're going to let this guy off the hook because he didn't know what he was doing? Again, that's up for the jury to decide. Juries do well, in my opinion. I think they get it right 98% of the time. Every once in a while, you get a runaway jury, but most jurors take their job very seriously. It's part of their civic duty, and I think they're going to look at this case and in the end go, it really doesn't matter to me that you're trying to prove to me that this guy started acting strange as he got older. It really doesn't convince me that some other person is involved in this. And even if they are, that doesn't absolve Tom Girardi of his own behavior. And so I think the jury ultimately will find, based on the evidence thus far, that this is not enough from the defense to excuse Tom Girardi of his behavior.
It'd be hard to imagine a jury doing anything else, but it looks like the prosecution's wrapping up its case in chief. We should be seeing Tom Girardi put on his case in chief. We've had a few defense witnesses, but he'll have a chance to put on his case, and we'll see where the evidence goes from there. So be sure to join us as we summarize day 9 of the Tom Girardi trial next.